As we continue to do a ton of applications, and the hope is that we don't have to do a million applications, but let's say it's 50. What are the odds that we're actually going to be able to keep track of every single company that we reached out to? Very unlikely. And it's super important as we get more methodical with everything that we do that we want to make sure that we're keeping track in a thoughtful way. This gets at the psychology principle of cognitive load theory. It's basically the human brain's capacity to remember a bunch of information. And due to overload or just trying to put too many things in there, we end up forgetting a bunch of stuff and we get our wires crossed and we mix up one company and a person we talked to with another company that we applied to and never spoke with anybody. So it's super important that we keep track of all of our applications, almost using like a second brain. Another way of looking at this is working memory limit. It's another psychology principle. It's Miller's law, basically the magic number 7. So if I gave you a string of 7 numbers to remember, on average, the result is like plus or minus 2. So a lot of people would be able to remember, oh, about 5. And a lot of people might be able to pull off 7. And there's a few people on the other side, I guess, of the bell curve that can remember 7 plus 2 more. The ultimate reason that I'm showing you this is there is zero chance that you're going to keep all of the different applications separate, and you'll start to get confused, which is really frustrating. So it's best to really make sure that we're organized, and I'm going to show how I do it and a few different ways that you could consider looking into this and using this for yourself because it does save a lot of time and reduces a ton of frustration. Tracking on a spreadsheet is really simple. I have always said the best tool for the job is the one that you will actually use. So, in many cases, there are AI tools that will allow you to automatically track. Now, these are very hit or miss, and I've included some of them here. So if you open this up, many of them have freemium versions or trials. So there you go nuts, try them out. You've seen Teal before, and just an FYI, Teal has a version of tracking, but there's still manual input. So if you're doing manual input, you might as well throw it onto a spreadsheet that you can consistently control, rip out things that you don't want, and kind of make it your own. The other side of this is I have provided my own tracking sheet, and we will go through kind of line by line how and what to put in there so that you're able to make this your own and continue to use it successfully. I am going to give you a crash course on the pipeline stages, but just bear in mind that you have access to this document, this sheet, and within this sheet, I have provided all the individual fields and what they stand for, as well as the main sheet that you're going to be able to use without the misspelling of application. And inside of resources, there's of course prompts for enrichment of individual companies when it comes to that. So let's dig into some of the individual ways of looking at stages within this pipeline of job search. And if you haven't done sales, this might be new for you, but if, like me, you have at a point in a previous life, then it kind of looks like this. This is a sales pipeline that's kind of put up on its side. It also, in many ways, looks kind of like a marketing funnel. But the whole idea is, let's say a lead comes in, then it's qualified, then hopefully we're contacting that person. You schedule a demo, the demo is completed. I send a proposal, the proposal is reviewed by the customer, and then hopefully we win the deal or we lose the deal or it's put on hold. This is a version of that just flipped over on its side. This is sales. And the crazy thing is, job search is kind of like selling yourself. So I have basically done a version of this and I've stripped out some of the different lines, but this would be exactly the same where you find all these jobs, you make sure it's a good fit for you, you start the application, you complete the application, you have a response from a select number of these, you schedule interviews, you attend interviews, you are required to do a test project. Then eventually there's an offer or there's some negotiation, and then the offer is accepted or it's put on hold or rejected. Now, I don't follow this specifically, so I am going to give you kind of a more robust version, but use the tool for what you can use it for. If you don't want 10 different stages, then fine, let's keep it to 3. But I think it's really important to remember that you are going to get a lot of no's before you get a yes. And building this out isn't meant to help you keep track of the no's. It's supposed to help you keep track of the little wins, the incremental growth from the beginning of a conversation with a project to hopefully our company or hopefully an offer being made. Watch this video. I've gotten a number of weird bits of feedback on this where people are like, oh, it's all about dating, hashtag me too. And it's like, no, dude, this is about enough at bats, enough attempts in order to see what you want out of either reaching out to people, job applications, or I don't know, dating maybe. Who knows? But please watch this video. I think it's very relevant and it's kind of dopey from these guys' standpoint, but to me, it makes a lot of sense and it resonates from the standpoint of you have to make a lot of attempts before the thing that you're trying to get will happen. So, again, from the concept of a sales pipeline, you have compliance or things that need to happen within each stage. So, in order for something to go from lead in to lead qualified, I need to speak with somebody. In order for me to say that I had contacted them, I need to have a meaningful conversation or a meaningful back and forth via email, and so on. This is really important to think about the stages of your job seeker pipeline. So I'm going to go into that, and I promise I'll stop making so many metaphors in relation to sales because maybe it's confusing for some people. But the big idea is that we are going to have a number of different statuses. Again, you can strip these out. They should have some requirements. I'm going to give you a high level version of this so you can keep track of everything that you do in terms of applying, having great conversations, interviews, test projects, and hopefully offers. So without further ado, I am going to get into it. The first stage of all of your application should basically be applied. If you're putting it into your spreadsheet, take the time to do the company research using the prompt, build out the resume and cover letter, and then change the status to applied. If it has entered that sheet, take the time to apply. You might as well do it. I don't believe in collecting a bunch of jobs in the job tracking form or job tracking sheets just to kind of have them sit there. Let's actually do the execution. The next thing is that we are eventually going to send connections, hopefully 3 per company on LinkedIn. This will allow us to keep ourselves from being just a line on a resume or getting lost in the jumble of all of the other people that have applied. This is also where potentially we can tailor some of the messages and we can repurpose some of the tools that we use in order to send email outreach. Those have a high level of extra work and a low level of results. I think LinkedIn is the best way to do that. After that, we are following up. And if people don't respond to us the first time we send a message or an email, that's okay. Usually it takes 2 to 3 messages for people to follow up. On LinkedIn, the requirement is that they have to accept your connection in order for you to actually follow up. I've provided a bunch of different resources that we'll get into later on the templates that you can use for follow ups. The next is a meeting set. Now, this one, some people strip out, and that's okay. The idea is that if you are having a networking meeting or if you're having your first meeting and you haven't actually sat down for an interview, I feel like that is a different stage. So that's why I've added this in here. This allows you to start preparing your company research so you don't show up feeling totally inept and incapable of talking about what they do. I think that is the worst thing in the world to show up without knowing what a company does. After that, it's interviews. Now, most companies are requiring more than one interview. You'll have the HR interview, you'll have your hiring manager interview, you might interview with other members of the team, then you might talk with a few different senior directors. I've been through different job interview processes where I've talked with 7 different people, technically 2 or 3 on some of the calls, so a total of like 12 people from the company and still didn't get the job. It is what it is. But there is a before, during, and after process that I will show later on what we do within interviews. Next, we are more than likely going to have to do a test project. Sometimes it's paired with a personality or intelligence test. I think those things are garbage, but unfortunately, that isn't our choice. We'll start working on our test project right away. We want to make sure that we complete it on time, and then we will make sure that we get a response after we send it in. And that's pretty self explanatory. After that, fingers crossed, we get an offer and we start negotiating. I always encourage people not to accept the first offer because there's so many variables that go into this. They're always trying to get you for the cheapest amount, and there's different ways that we can negotiate that don't necessarily take money off the table or take the offer off the table. A lot of people get really spooked about doing that. If they've made their decision, they're probably going with you, but that's a different section of the course. After that, you've accepted the offer, and I would say you don't have to update this sheet anymore. But yeah, I think it's also helpful to send the rejections to the companies that you're currently in talks with, or not. I don't know. It's up to you. They never do on us, right? And then the other kind of side version of this that you saw with the sales pipeline is that you do have a section for rejected jobs. And this actually is really interesting because a lot of rejected jobs can be saved. I was working with somebody the other day that received a rejection after a personality test. And it was like, this is crazy. Why don't you just send something real quick and say, hey, I found some of the questions to be a bit odd. Can you double check that you rejected me for the personality test? And then the person got back and was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was an auto response. We've been trying out this new tool. Yes, do you have time to talk on Monday? It's like, oh my God, who are these people? HR. And yeah, I think rejection responses can actually be really interesting and save a lot of heartache, but also keep you potentially in mind for either a different position or different ways. I got information on that. We'll go into that in the module. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in terms of stuff being on hold, like cloud companies that are like, oh, we took down the role. We decided to go a different direction. Happens all the time. And I promise it's not the end of the world, but you can a response or build a templated response to always handle those. The last one is ghosted. And if a company has not responded to you in 30 days and you've given a number of small pings and follow-ups, then in all likelihood, it's a ghosted opportunity. This happens even in modern times. It is super unprofessional. There is no recourse after a certain point, but there's a lot of ways that we can handle this professionally. There's a lot of ways that you can turn around and be like, fuck you, but that doesn't actually do anything other than maybe stroke our hurt ego. But I mean, who's that for? The big thing that you have to keep in mind with all of this is it is continuous tracking. When a shift change or a status change happens, make sure to make updates. If you are able to find the people that you want to connect with on LinkedIn, I usually add them in here, which is why I've built out this kind of really long linear version of your job tracking and applications. I have often created Google Docs in order to throw in on notes. So basically, if it makes sense and I'm further along inside of this particular company flow in terms of the application process, I may end up swapping in interview notes with a doc or just, yeah, long form notes inside of a Google Doc. I have showed you already how to do this with a resume and cover letter. If you are at this point confused, you're not alone. There are other ways to do this that are way simpler, and I would say go for it. Any tracking is better than none, and I've provided a number of tools here that allow you to do that. So this is pretty straightforward stuff. You have Google Sheets, you have Notion, you have Airtable. Folk is kind of like a user-friendly CRM. Copper I've never used, but I've heard great things, and then a few other tools that have been mentioned here. There are templates that are not my own that you are welcome to check out. A lot of college students get this LAMP alumni connection uh, tracking thing. It's basically finding all the different alumni that are in their network and building out a bunch of LinkedIn URLs in the sheet and then figuring out what the common ground is and then sending them a connection request and following that status all the way through. Feel free to check all of these out. I think there are so many different ways of doing this, and I showed you mine, which is a bit more robust or too robust for some people. In some cases, this is a simpler version. Dude, you just have to decide. It's up to you. But I want to make it very clear that if you are not tracking the different jobs that you're in touch with, there's a high likelihood that you're either mixing things up or you're losing stuff, which sucks. So please, please, please try to use some version of a tracking tool. My sheet works for me, but if you want something less complicated, I showed you a few different versions. Let's talk like quick external validation application tracking stats. I know this is like the most fucking exciting thing in the world. Percent of candidates that never even hear back from an employer. Percent of job seekers said they would wait only 2 weeks for a callback and assume this job is lost. Percent of job seekers say they don't feel they are organized with their efforts. And the results, 62% of candidates never hear back. I think it's higher. 66% of job candidates said they would only wait 2 weeks for a callback and assume the job is lost. And I kind of fall into that group as well. 70% of job seekers say they don't feel they are organized enough with their efforts. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. This is another external validation of somebody basically explaining how they do job tracking. Again, if I have showed you something that is way too complicated, there's always a few steps down from that. So this is linked in here. Remember, we just went through this. You got the LAMP thing, you got your job hunter sheet, you got your application tracker, whatever you need to use so that you're keeping track of stuff, go for it. If my stuff is too complicated, take a more rudimentary approach. Cool. So after you have learned how to do an AI tailored cover letter, an AI tailored resume, hitting the questions with AI, you now have the ability to track jobs. There is no excuse for you not to start doing the applications at scale. So I encourage you to start doing some of this now. This is a very simple application tracking brief. Beyond that, I go into a bit more detail further on in the brief about how to really kind of save everything and keep super organized, but it's all one big activity. So start doing the applications now. And now we can finally say that, okay, we've done all the prep work. We've gotten a ton of these other ancillary stuff kind of out of the way. I want to show you a lot of the cool hacks and different methodologies for applying for a shitload more jobs. And we're going to get into that next. Super exciting stuff.